everybody. Hopefully you can see me all right. Anyways, all right, I'm going to share with you something that I'm extremely passionate about. I've been passionate about for over 25 years. That's because I've got 25 plus years experience doing this, and that's calling in deer. It floors me at how many hunters are call shy. And I read about this in magazines, deer hunting magazines, deer hunting books. I hear about this in podcasts and all that. There's an extreme amount of so-called deer hunters out there that are call shy. They just don't have faith in calling, or don't take the time to learn a call, learn how it works, learn all about calling in deer, and learn about how it could be an extreme game changer. There's so many mule deer hunters and white-tailed deer hunters and moose hunters, and just all those hunters that pursue game that are extremely social critters and that vocalize. Like white-tailed deer have 90 vocalizations, 90 different sounds that they make. But us hunters, we're only honing in on learning and getting familiarized with 5 or 8 of those sounds. So it's unreal how really social these animals are out there. And you gotta realize we're not living out there in the wilderness with these animals, hearing and seeing and watching, observing them on a day-to-day basis. Deer, moose, mule deer, and many other critters, animals like turkey and stuff, they're extremely social, vocalizing critters. They make a lot of sounds and noises. And so you've got to think and realize how many deer hunters are letting walk by them that they otherwise could have coaxed in for a shot. Especially bow hunters. I mean, when you're up in a tree stand hunting with a bow and arrow, you're really handicapping yourself in the sense that you're limiting yourself to only like a 30-yard max shot at this quarry, this animal that you're pursuing, versus hunting with a firearm, a rifle, where you can shoot one out to 200 yards. So a bow hunter up in a stand sees a deer out there 100, 150 yards, and they're walking away from them. And if that hunter's call shy, they didn't take the time to learn a deer call, learn how they work, and learn how wonderful a deer call really is, that nice buck out there 150 yards just walked out of that hunter's life probably for good. There's a good chance that hunter will never see that particular deer again the rest of that hunting season. But if that hunter learned a deer call and learned just how wonderful a tool these devices can be for a hunter, the hunter could have coaxed that buck in closer. That the hunter could have perked up the ears of that buck, stopped him, made him look and listen, wonder what that other buck is doing over there. That buck that hunter could be seeing could be laying down scrapes. He could be running his scrape line, running the edge of a field, going from scrape to scrape. He could be feeling the effects of the rut. He could be frustrated because the does aren't yet in estrus. They're not coming in heat. But that buck's ready to breed. As soon as those bucks shed their velvet, their antlers harden, they're ready to breed right in there. And all through September and early October, towards late October into early November, these bucks are feeling effects of frustration, sexual frustration, because the does aren't yet in estrus. They're not ready to mate. So those bucks thrash and rub the trees and they scrape the ground. There could be shadow scrapes. Those are just random pawings on the ground because the buck's just frustrated because that doe's not standing still, not smelling right, and the buck's sexually frustrated. He doesn't know anything better to do other than tear apart a tree or scrape the ground. And so that buck could be sexually frustrated out there because he's checking scrapes. He's not smelling any estrus secretions from any does nearby them scrapes. He's sniffing the air, doing the phlegming, the lip curl, he's smelling the urine of does on the ground, and he's getting that scent up into that sixth gland up in the roof of his mouth, and he's lip curling and phlegming and trying to he's tasting the scent, the smell of that urine. He's learning that none of the does in the area are ready, and he's getting frustrated because of it. So he's raking, rubbing trees and hitting the ground, scraping. So a deer hunter can use all that to his advantage in early bow season and early gun season too, to coax in a sexually frustrated buck by using the magic deer call. What was that? It stops him. You call loud once or twice to get the buck to stop. Stand his ground. And he looks and listens. As soon as that buck turns back, starts to take a step, you hit him again. This time a little bit lower volume. That buck already heard that other deer down there. Heard that call. Oh, it stops him. He looks again. He turns his head, he calls. Oh man, that really got him going. Then that buck, he'll turn on a dime, 90-degree turn, and that buck will walk straight to the hunter in that stand. And the hunter is all excited, shaking like a leaf. The stand, that big trophy buck is closing the distance fast. He's out to 100 yards, 80 yards, 60 yards, 50, and the hunter's getting ready to draw. The buck's out there 30 yards, and he stops just around. He starts to turn broadside. The hunter draws. The buck's walking away, quartering away out there about 30 yards, 28 yards. Hunter drills him. The hunter gets his big trophy buck. If that hunter was call shy, that deer could have walked out of that hunter's life for good. And that hunter may have never crossed paths with that particular buck ever again the rest of his life. Deer calls are a wonderful thing in the hunting world, in the deer hunting world. You've got to remember that. Please do yourself a favor. If you're watching this live stream from me, I got to make sure it is going live. Yeah, it's been going for, hopefully you all can see me. Yeah, making sure that we're still live for all of you. Hopefully my head's not cut off. But, oh well. All that matters is that you see the deer calls and see how I'm using them and hear me talking about it. I have here the True Talker by Hunter Specialties. The True Talkers have been around for eons. Hunter Specialties, that company's been around for over 20 years. That's like a 30-year-old company or something. That's a very old company. It's changed hands, like ownership throughout the years. But the True Talker by Hunter Specialties has been around forever and a day. I've always loved. It's one of the first calls that I've heard and used that sounded the most realistic, that sounded to me like a real deer. It's built with a ribbed tube here that's similar to the esophagus of a deer. So is this one. A lot of deer call manufacturers know to have these tubes looking similar to and sounding similar to the vocals, like the sounds coming out of the tube of the neck of the deer. Doesn't that sound good? It sounds real. I don't know if you've ever heard a real live deer grunt from a doe or a buck. I have. I've heard real live deer calling out around me and out, and like so many times. I'm constantly. I have the good fortune to work in the woods, to work like where I work, where my employment is. I'm out in the woods around deer and turkey and bear and moose, like all the time, like constantly. I get to watch and observe them while at work, and I've listened to podcasts and read a lot about them. I've spent my 25 plus years hunting, learning everything I can about deer calling and deer calling tactics and tips, and learning about different deer calls. I have 3 different ones behind the phone there that I'll show you at a later time. I've got a bleat can and a couple other different grunting tubes. So I have here with me 2 different types of deer calls. But I've been learning everything about deer calling for a long time. And I've called in and harvested like over 90% of the deer that I've shot with bow and arrow or gun. I've called in. I was using some form of deer call to coax in the bucks or does, so they close distance to give me that nice close shot with my bow, or in some cases even with my gun. I've shot in all of my deer except maybe a couple. And now I'm talking about all these deer I've shot. In the 25 years, guys, that I've been deer hunting, I may have, I think I'm upwards of 30 deer under my belt, to my credit. Because I hunt expanded archery zones, I always start every deer season with 3 tags in my pocket. And there are years where I've filled all 3 tags, where I've shot in like a buck or 2 does, or I've shot in 2 bucks and a doe. And there's many years out of those 25 plus years I've been deer hunting that I've filled 2 of 3 tags. So several years I've shot in 2, some years shot in 3. And the majority of those 25 years I may have shot in just 1. But I get it at least 1 deer every year. I average at least 1 deer tag being filled each and every year. All of those 25 years I've been deer hunting. And like I've mentioned earlier, 90% probably, if not even more, of all those 30 deer I've shot, and I believe 100% I've lured in with the call, because I had been doing a call in sequence. I've been imagining like at the time of year I was hunting then, I'd been imagining like what I've been playing out a scenario. I did a role. I pretty much deer calling is role playing to the deer out there. You've got to think like a deer, be a deer, put yourself in the deer's hooves, and imagine what a buck might be doing in September, what he might be doing in October, November, what types of calls and sounds he might be making, and the reasons why he's making those calls and sounds. You can mimic them, play that out to a T with the deer calls that you can buy at Walmart or Cabela's or order offline. And you can mimic those. And also, you got to think about what the types of sounds and calls the does make too, and the reasons why. In September, early season, September into early October, the does and fawns are extremely vocal with each other. A fawn that's kind of grazing off, straying away from mama, the doe goes this way 50 yards, the fawn goes this way, and the doe and fawn are separated 50 by 50, 80 yards in thick brush, and the doe and fawn can't see each other. What better way for them to kind of pinpoint where one another is? By calling. A lost fawn does a mew sound called fawn mewing, fawn mews. It just sounds like a calf, a lost calf, a cow calf out in the pasture calling. That sounds really good. This is the Extractor by Flextone, the Flextone company, Flextone Deer Calls, the Extractor. Yeah, that sounds really good. That's the lost fawn call, the mew, if you will. A fawn will make that exact sound when it strays from mama, and a doe will answer. This has got the Easy Slide, Easy Glide, this Extractor by Flextone. You can move the slide to D for doe. I was up on the F for fawn, and there's a B for buck calls. And the doe will answer. If the doe hears that fawn mewing, the doe might answer. Just a short half-second belch, like, if you will. That's an attention grunt. That's just a, hey, I'm over here. Hey, how you doing? I'm Joe Smo. Come check me out. Hey, how you doing today? You know, an attention grunt, an attention grabber. That the doe is saying to that fawn, "Hey, I'm over here." That's what all attention grunts are. All deer make the attention grunt. Fawns, does, bucks, yearling bucks, mature bucks, old does, young does. They all make some form of just a grunt, but they're gonna all sound different in pitches and loudness and gutturalness, depending on the age structure of the deer. A fawn's grunt might be like, so if I go back to fawn, it might be, it might actually sound similar to the lost call. The mew. That's the mew. But a fawn can grunt too. Just especially when fawns, they're extremely playful. I dropped my true talk. I don't know if you've ever observed this, but I have. Me and my family, friends have observed this many times. Fawns, they're just like our toddlers and infants at home, right? The fawns are extremely playful, and they jump and push each other, push and shove, and they'll grunt. They'll be very extremely vocal and shoving and pushing and chasing and running around. Now, so back to the mewing, right? So we got the lost fawn just mewed. Oh, and then mama answers back. So the doe hears the fawn. Oh, and the fawn answers back, and they'll just keep communicating a bit, grunting and mewing, till they find each other, till they meet back up. And the doe, I've seen this many times. I've witnessed this from the stand while hunting in early October. Young fawns are still quite young. They're barely 6 to 8. They're barely 5, 6 months old in early October. Come like rifle season, fawns, yearlings, are only like 6 to 8 months old. Or well, let's see, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. Yeah, 6, 7. They're barely 7 months old in October, November. And those fawns, they're still going to be sound very young and adolescent like, and they're gonna mew when they're lost, and their grunts are gonna sound like what I just showed you. I've seen and observed this many times while sitting in my archery stand, bow hunting in October. They're lost. Like I've had does and yearlings come under me. I'm sitting there, and the fawns were talking back and forth with each other. It was a buck fawn and doe fawn. I saw the little buttons on the buck, and there was a female fawn as well. And it was incredibly cool. It was one of the most awesome, the best experiences I've ever had while deer hunting. And I didn't shoot a deer that day, but I had these 2 fawns with their doe come in, and the buck let out a ball, like grunt, and then the doe fawn, the female fawn, let out a grunt, like you could distinctly hear the differences between male and female fawns. I could tell which one was female, which one was male. These 2 fawns, and none of them had antlers growing. I could barely make out the buttons on the buck, but you could hear the distinct differences between a female vocalization and a male vocalization, but even with these fawns, a buck fawn and doe fawn. And then the doe would come in. I specifically remember the doe putting her nose. You guys, you got to hear me out in this. I was spraying down scent away sprays, and all these odor eliminating products on the market aren't 100% foolproof. It helps to also have cover scents like Evercalm or other deer lure cover scents too, to help do like the nose jam them up, jam the noses of the deer, so it gives you like 30, 40 extra seconds time to like get a shot off if you can jam their noses. But long story short, the doe sniffs my tree step. She almost brushed against it. They walked so close to my tree that I was sitting in. The doe caught a glimpse or smell of that tree step smell, and then she jumped. She actually jumped forward. The doe went right in front, went like 30 yards out in front of me to the right, jumped forward, spooked from the sight and smell of that tree step. And the fawns went left. They both went separate ways. The buck and doe fawn jumped into the dried up stream to my left, and they were out of sight of mama. Doe was over here, and the fawns started mewing. They were doing their lost mews, their lost calls, and the doe would grunt, and they found each other very quickly. And I've witnessed this sort of similar thing many times over and over again all through the 25 years of deer hunt experience that I have. I've seen where the does and fawns communicate to each other, find each other, come back up, and the doe and fawn would brush cheeks. They'd touch noses, brush. It's the cutest, most adorable, humbling thing ever, and it makes it hard for me to shoot does, and I've shot many does, but the ethical thing would be to shoot a doe that doesn't have fawns with her. That's the ethical thing for all deer hunters to do. If a hunter has a doe tag and they're going to take a doe, it's good to take a big, older, mature-looking doe that might be barren, she may not be able to give birth again, but take a doe that doesn't have fawns with her. That's an ethical thing to do. And I've shot many does throughout the years, and I've killed does, I've called by using this calling tactic. I've had does come charging right in, running in. When you're doing the lost fawn calling, the mewing, it it triggers the maternal instincts within that doe, and that even a doe with fawns will leave her fawns to come looking for a lost fawn just because you do that, and it just triggers those motherly loving instincts. And that doe don't want to. They just don't want to leave a lost fawn out there lost, and I've had does come running, charging right into doing that, and I've waited like 20 seconds, 30 seconds after mewing, and I've let out a couple doe grunts into that calling sequence, and that really fires up a doe and also too, another doe near where a doe is raising her young. Sometimes does come rushing in to your calling too because they're kind of territorial. They want to charge that other doe, get those other does, other deer away from where they're raising their young. Especially if those fawns are only like 3+ months old, they're still really young. A doe's maternal instincts could be sort of aggressiveness, and that doe might charge other deer, run off other like yearling bucks and does away from where they're trying to keep their fawns safe. They don't. A doe doesn't want any unwanted scents and odors and attractants for predators to hone in on where they have their fawns. So you're playing on those two things when you're doing this calling sequence, mewing, mixing in some doe grunts in early season. You're playing on the maternal instincts and that the doe don't want a fawn lost. They might want to go take care of the fawn, help it out. Or you're playing on the fact that a doe has young fawns, and they don't want other deer giving away their cover where they're hiding, where that doe's hiding her fawn. So there's that. So that's doe and fawn calls. Let's get into the calls that you really are interested in. And that's buck vocalizations. Now, let's remember, you've got to picture deer calling, role playing. You got to play out a scenario in your head. Okay, so now early season gets into like late October, towards the seeking, chasing phase of the rut, where does might their urine secretions might start to smell like they're getting near heat, but they're not quite. They still got another week or two to go, but the bucks are getting riled right up. They're firing up. They're scraping like crazy, rubbing trees out of frustration. And now a buck sees a doe. Okay. Remember now, early in the season, in that seeking phase of the rut, when it is the seeking phase of the rut, it kind of transitions into the chasing phase. There's like a 2-week window there, period, where bucks are bumping, nudging does. They're harassing does and chasing does around. They'll do what's called like a tendon grunt when they're tending that doe and they're dogging that doe, and that's a series of grunts of. And they might even bawl in there. Then the bucks almost grunt every step they take, and out of frustration they bawl. They really brought. Called a buck bawl. They do it when the doe won't stand on the ground. She's not smelling right. The buck just really wants to breed now. He wants the doe now, but the doe's playing hard to get, and he'll bawl. Tendon grunting. I use that grunting snare, that grunting sequence that you just saw me do and play out. I use that religiously, like crazy, in all of October into early November. In September, I almost exclusively just use fawn and doe calls because it also plays on the curiosity of a buck. It can call in bucks too, and yearling bucks. So when hunting expanded archery zones, I don't mind shooting a 1.5-year-old buck, a 4-pointer, or 2-year-old buck. So I do, but also I'm in expanded archery areas looking to fill doe tags too. So I'm almost exclusively sticking to doe and fawn calling and talk in September. But getting into October, when I'm able to hunt anywhere in the state, when I'm able to hunt my prize areas, hunt where I'm after, where I've got target bucks that I'm after, some shooter bucks, then I'll do tendon gruntings. And I'll mix in, sometimes too with a different call, so it sounds differently. I'll mix in some doe bleats too. Like a doe bleat. A bleat is longer than a grunt. A grunt's like a half-second short burp, and a bleat is a little more drawn out. A bleat could be 1 full second. One. One. So that's a bleat. Grunt, half second. Bleat. Remember, the half second grunt is an attention grabber, just a hello, hey, I'm over here. The deer, remember, you're playing on the socialism of these deer. These deer, they want to know where other deer are, the whereabouts of other deer. They're constantly calling for other deer, talking to other deer, communicating. They're not just, bucks aren't just communicating with the scrapes on the ground and the rubs on the trees and the licking branches. Yes, they're leaving calling cards behind with the preorbital gland scent and the scents from the nose and saliva and the preorbital glands at the base of their antlers and stuff. They're leaving those glandular scents on the licking branch, and they're urinating on their hocks, tarsal glands, and rubbing the legs together, peeing in the scrape. Yes, those are all calling cards, if you will. That's a way to communicate with the does, and the doe will come by and she'll pee nearby, and she might hang around that scrape for several days or a week in hopes the buck that comes back by, especially when does, when they're near heat, near estrus. That's when scrapes are hot, the hottest. When it's not always a good idea to like just hunt rub lines, hunt rubs. A lot of times rubs are made after, that could be nocturnal sign where just a frustrated buck was walking along through just inside the woods along the field edge because none of the does out there in the field smelt right, and he's just rubbing trees on the edge of dark and into the dark, into the night, and he's rubbing his way back into his bedding area. You want to, early season, you want to get as close to a buck's bedding area, bedroom, his core area, as possible, and hunt those scrapes. That buck's going to have scrapes nearby, close by his bedding area. Hunt those. If the sign's hot, screaming, hunt me now, hunt those scrapes. And those, they're going to get real hot when it's get closer to a doe being in heat and estrus. She's going to urinate nearby, hang out nearby. Now, let me rewind a little bit. I'm talking about hunting near buck bedding areas, buck bedrooms, scrapes near buck bedrooms. Now, the buck's home range is massive, it's huge. They have the bucks when they're bachelor groups, and does are in their doe group stuff. Early summer, they have the summer ranges, the areas where they have ample food and cover and water early in the summer, spring, summer, or early fall, like maybe first week of September. But towards second week, late September into October, the bucks and does, they move to their fall ranges. The foods dry up. The what they were eating back in the summers dried up, gone away, not palatable anymore to the deer. They're gonna move towards their fall ranges where the food's better, where they got plenty of food. The leaves are gonna start falling off the trees. They also know that they're gonna move to the fall ranges, areas where it's thicker cover, where they feel safe and secure, where there's ample food and water, bedding cover nearby. And the bucks, they show way more interest in does in September. They vacay where they were hanging out all summer long in those cornfields, pasture fields. The bucks were extremely visible all summer long. You saw them. They were easy to spot, see, and watch and glass. And all of a sudden they disappear. Where the heck do they go? Doesn't mean that there's an October lull. The deer activity is actually extremely more. The deer are way more active in mid-October, all through October. And you just got to be smarter than the deer. You've got to do your scouting and get out there, find where that core area that the buck's honing in on. He's going to have scrapes and rubs all around. Where you're finding fresh scrapes laid down and rubs. You're in September. You do your September scouting. Get out there, find a place to hang your stand near a buck bedroom for early season bow hunt. The deer activity it'll floor you how much deer activity there is in October if you really hunt smart. You really do your thorough scouting and learn learn your hunting areas really well. Learn where the summer and the hangouts are for the summer versus the fall ranges for the bucks and does. And key in on those places for early hunts, mid October, late October hunts on into the rut hunt in November. So yeah, so I'm talking about keying in on a buck bedding area where there's hot scrapes and rubs. That's where he's hanging out for the fall. He's coming out of his bedroom and he's checking those scrapes, and he's going to this doe group over here. He's checking this doe over here. The bucks, they're all of a sudden where they once were in the summer. Now they're where they're closest to, where they're on like the outskirts edges of those doe groups, where those doe bedding areas are. The buck trails are going to come and meet up with doe trails and doe feeding areas. All of a sudden, those little micro food plots you planted out in the woods become hot. Those secluded little clover patches with trails coming to and from, with thick bedding cover nearby around water source and escape cover. Those become hot. Have your mock scrapes on the edges of those food plots, and have some other mock scrapes nearby, live scrapes, scraped by a real buck, to really fire up that buck, to keep that buck interested in that area longer and keep him coming out in the daylight so you can get that shot. And so now I'm role playing. Remember, back to calling, being role playing. So I did my whole spiel and talk about why bucks move and shift, why they do the way they do, and so forth, and does shift why they do in the fall. So back to calling. So that a buck, I just mentioned tendon grunting. I'm showing you the tendon grunt because the buck will get up, head out, check scrapes, head to the food plot, or out to a little field or an opening or clearing, a cutting in the woods. And he's checking the does, he's scent checking them, he's watching them, and he goes out and starts chasing them around. He's gonna grunt every step. The doe won't stop, he'll bawl. Tendon grunting. A doe she'll bleat in frustration. The bleating too can be a doe wanting the attention of a buck or trying to get out of the attention of other does. Bleating sometimes too can be a call that a fawn or doe or even a buck makes when they're kind of they're agitated or they're annoyed. They might bleat out. Like when I've witnessed this, heard this, and saw this in the woods firsthand. I've spent many of my winters across the street from my house where I lived down in southern Maine on fish and game property, sitting on the ridges and practicing calling. I've called deer in the dead of winter, in December, in January. I've called deer in, and I've had them come in grunting every couple steps, calling back to me with snow on the ground, a foot of snow. I'm tucked away, hidden in the pines. It's January. I'm calling, I'm grunting, just attention grunting. That's all I was like practicing, just like light calls, just a little just a light bleat, or mainly just grunting, to really just see it work, see the effects of it, to really gain some trust in the calling and faith in the calling. And I've had deer right in the dead of winter come in calling back like a turkey would, and not see me. They've walked by 15 yards in front of me, and they'd go over here and grunt a couple times. They'd stop and look and listen and grunt, and then they were satisfied that the deer wasn't around still. They missed it, and they've turned back, grunted a couple times. They turned around and gone back to where I'd called them up from, and they'd gone and bedded down, laid down in the lowlands, or they've gone and grazed. But in this area that I'm talking about, the same area on this ridge in the wintertime, I've seen this in the winter, seen this like in the fall, where the does and yearlings and other yearling bucks and just a group of deer coming up, they're on a hot food source, and I think they do this, and they're showing aggression over a hot food source because they're trying to all share the food, but they want it for themselves. And I've seen deer jump, bleat, and like frustration and annoyance, and then like jump up and box the other deer and like hit the back of the other deer with their front hoofs, and then the other one would bleat and frustrate and run off. So the bleating can have many various meanings. So like I've mentioned, this is from, if you read Deer Hunting, listen to podcasts, or you can research it yourself, look it up, that there's like over 90 different vocalization sounds that deer make. But we're only us hunters are only learning like 8 total or so to really help us be successful hunters. And so the bleat can have many different meanings. And now, obviously, I'm sure you heard of the estrus bleat. A doe. Well, I mentioned the bleating being used for like urgency. A bleat is an urgent call. Grunt is just in every season. You can grunt year round, doing the intention grunting to attract, say hi to another deer that's walking away. You want to just grunt to it to stop it. And when it turns its head, grunt some more to try to turn the deer to come to you, help give you that close shot if you're bow hunting early season. But bleating, the doe will bleat when she's sexually frustrated. Herself, she'll estrus bleat. Might be 1.5, 2 seconds long. And you might hear there's just the frustrated bleat from the buck tending her. She'll 1 second. Some bleats are just 1 second long. As she's running away from the buck, she'll bleat. But a doe, if she's near her estrus cycle, and she's willing to stand her ground and breed with this buck, she could call out to him in sexual frustration and bleat. A little estrus bleat. And that buck will, he'll grunt all happily. So this could be a call-in sequence, a call-in scenario, role play for you guys when you're out there this fall. You could do a few estrus bleats. Wait a second. Do like a series of 3 or 4. And maybe wait like 30 seconds or so. While you're waiting, after estrus bleating, you gotta listen and look, observe your surroundings. Listen for any approaching deer. If nothing, after like 30 seconds, almost a minute, you can answer with some grunting, buck grunts. Guttural grunt. Notice this isn't the attendant grunt. It's just a buck grunting every few seconds. I don't know if you've witnessed this too, and like maybe sitting up the stand and a non-target buck comes by, your own buck. Younger bucks and even older bucks, they'll just, like I said, deer are making these calls and sounds on a day-to-day basis for any different scenario, for any reason. A buck could be grazing a lot, feeding, and as he lifts his head from whatever he's nibbling on, he might let out a grunt as he goes to the next patch of clover. And he'll stop, eat. A buck could grunt for many reasons. He'll just grunt, because he's trying to attract does and stuff to his area. He's trying to. He might smell that there's another deer nearby. The reason why the buck could be letting out grunts is because he knows there's a doe like 100 yards away. He may have seen her or just smelled it, that doe's there. And he could be calling every now and then in hopes that deer comes check him out, comes over, because he's wanting to be social. Hang with a doe, dogger, scent checker, and stuff. And the doe could do the same thing. A grazing doe that's a lone doe that you don't see another deer around. That doe all of a sudden might start letting out calls. So let's go to the D for doe on the extractor call by flex tone. See the difference in tone and pitch? It sounds like girlish. That's a doe grunt. And a doe might grunt too, just to grab the attention of other deer, especially if it comes out from its bed all alone. A doe that don't have fawns with her, and the other does in the doe group aren't anywhere near her. They could have been bedded 50, 100, 80 yards away. She might come out, the first doe out into a field or food plot might call to the other deer to get the attention of those other does bedded nearby to come feed. She's letting them know everything's good out here, everybody. Perks up the ears and Get those other deer up early and coming out to feed. So that's a role play scenario with doe calling. And ultimately, obviously, in turn, you're doing that doe calling. What are you going to attract? The bucks, the buck that you're after. Let's go back. So you heard the doe call. This is a doe. Let's go back to the buck. Let's hear the unmanly. Super cool, huh? There you go. I've been live streaming for a long time, everybody. This has probably gone on long enough. I want to kind of end with this. I'm going to revisit this topic and give you some call-in tips, pointers, tactics, like just a little teaser into what I might talk about next in my next live stream about call-in tips and tactics is a buck. Here's the call. The buck's coming in. He closed the distance, maybe he was out 100. The buck closes the distance 50 yards after calling to him. You called to him facing him. The call tube angled to him because he was far away. You had to call loudly to get him to hear it, stop him, get him to turn. But he hangs up out of 50 yards. Because when the deer are coming, put the calls away, stop talking. They can pinpoint. Deer are extremely good at pinpointing the exact location of a sound, given the ears, the unique multi-directional ear, the big ears. They can hone right in on where you are, where that so-called deer is, but it's really you pretending to be a deer. But the deer comes and is wide open. He's looking. You don't see or hear the deer again. He might hang up out there a little too far. So a call-in tip here, call-in tactic tip, if you will. The buck angles away, starts at 50 yards, starts walking away again. This time, don't point the call. He's closer, so don't point the call directly to him and really and have him peg you in that tree. He'll turn his head just like this and look right up at you in the tree if he's 50 yards away. So this is a call-in tip. Take this with you. I'm going to end with this, but I'm going to revisit this topic in another live stream. So we're going to leave with this important call tip. He's walking away. He's angling away 50 yards. Buck's going away. Turn the call behind you. Don't call real loud either. Cup the end of the call tube with your hand and let the call sound like it's way behind you. Make that buck think that deer, that other buck, the buck he wants to come in to fight, to chase off, is walking away from him. And it's going to turn him, make it come in, close the distance another 20 yards maybe, and give you a 10, 15-yard shot. Call lighter and softer, but angle it away. And look. Care. Check him out. Yeah. Oh, he heard it. Okay, he turned, and he's coming. Right on dime. I've killed my biggest buck to date. Really nice big 8-pointer with my bow. Using deer calls. This buck, he was running a scrape line. He hit his scrapes that were behind me on the field edge. I was tucked inside the woods about 10 yards off of the field, the opening. And there was rubs, there was some buck rubs, there was a couple of his scrapes behind me. And I was watching a run down on a ridge where I was watching the bedding area where I expected him to come from. He did come from the direction I expected him to come from, but instead of coming down below me where I wanted him to, he came up above me and behind me, and he hit one of his scrapes behind me. And he was going to go away. He was like 50 yards over my right shoulder, angling away, and he was going to head away. I did just that, because he was close. I didn't call him in initially. He came in on his own, just me sitting there, waiting him out for an evening sit. The buck come in just right on the dot, just right on cue. But he was going to go away and not present me a shot opportunity. Really nice, big, over 20-inch wide, plus 8-pointer, really big buck. My biggest buck with a bow to date. And I did this like 3 times. I angled the call away from him. Make it sound like the deer was walking away from him and further away than what it was. Oh man, that buck did an about face, turned 90 degrees and came right to me. I was doing the buck grunt, and it got him all fired up. He tore up one of his current rubs. The tree was already rubbed. He was rubbing. He hit a rub again, was tearing it up, rubbing, and He kept coming. He gave me like perfect 20-yard shot broadside. I drilled him, and the rest is history. So I want to end with that. So I hope you remember that cool call and tip tactic, and use this, all this, everything I shared with you to your advantage. Please don't be call shy. Get familiarized with your deer call, whatever deer call you use. Every deer call on the market will call in deer. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be the cheapest, mid-range, mid-priced, or most expensive deer call. They're all going to call in deer, but learn it. Learn how to use it. Watch videos on it. Read about it. And go practice it too. Sorry, I'm spit. Practice the calling in an area where you don't plan on hunting, like out in your backyard. Go try to call deer right in your yard or anywhere where you don't plan on hunting, and practice it, get familiarized, and gain faith in it, trust in it. It's going to be a game changer for you, I promise. Go shoot your biggest buck this year using deer calls. Call them in. All right, everybody, smash that like button for me, could you, before you leave? If you're not subscribed to Spikes and Gills already, please subscribe. Click the notification bell so you'll be notified of all future uploads. I greatly appreciate it. I'd like to see Spikes and Gills grow. I can't grow and go places without your help and support, so please subscribe. Smash the like button before you go. All right, everybody, see you next time.